Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is Alan with another broadcast of the Monologue Morning Digest for you. And as always, you can help the channel grow by liking, subscribing, hitting the bell for notifications. But most importantly, I ask that you guys share the content. Now, you can find a link for donations in the description below, paypal.me/Monologue Morning Digest, as well as a link to my BitChute. That is Monologue Morning Digest over there, and we are officially up and running. I hope that you guys join me just in case YouTube doesn't keep me around for too much longer. Now we're going to jump right back into the Tartarian reset because there's a few subjects that I didn't come full circle on in my last video, and I definitely want to jump back into that. It's a topic that drives a lot of conversation, and I can tell that there's a lot of people definitely interested in it. I want to start out by talking about the Mormon temples over in Utah. Now, in a previous video, I've already discussed how the Mormons' movements match the pattern of mudflood events that took place in that region. And my theory is that the Mormons settled that region because they inherited a bunch of structures that were already present. Now, this hinges on the Mormon temples being constructed previous to us spanning out into that region for settlement, and there's a lot of evidence that suggests that this is actually true, albeit anecdotal. It is very strong. Now, what a lot of people don't know is, supposedly, the Mormon temples and a bunch of other structures were all designed in the span of 3 to 4 years by a plumber, okay? Now, what's miraculous about this is, after he designed these buildings, he all of a sudden retires and ends his life and career as a carpenter. So you're telling me that this plumber, with no architecture experience other than laying plumbing in pre-existing buildings, and we're talking about primitive plumbing, by the way, designed 18 buildings, albeit 18 buildings that architects today admit that they would not be able to design to the precision that it's designed. And not only that, we would have a hard time conceiving the structure itself with modern equipment. Now, they would have us believe that the Mormons built these structures in a span of 3 to 4 years with nothing but frontiersmen's tools, as well as wagon and oxen. You're telling me that they quarried every single stone for those structures in 4 years, as well as constructed some of the most magnificent temples and structures that I have ever seen in my own 2 eyes. If you've never been to Utah and seen those buildings, you have no idea what I am talking about. They might as well be castles. They are pristine, they are precise. It is amazing what the people that built those structures were able to accomplish. Now, we see buildings like this all over the country. It is not just the Mormon temples that were inherited. There are a lot of other structures that were left around from a civilization that we don't know about. And something else that points to this as being evident is the world fairs themselves. Now, a lot of people, historians, would have you believe that the world's fairs were constructed and then taken down afterwards. They'd have you believe that a lot of those buildings were built out of a plaster of Paris, etc., etc., etc. However, if you look at a lot of these photos from World's Fairs, the ones in Chicago, the one in Philadelphia, right? The one in Paris, the one in New York, the one in San Francisco, okay? A lot of these buildings were absolutely magnificent. You have the Eiffel Tower, okay? Now, they would have us believe that the Eiffel Tower was constructed for the World's Fair, right? And then all of a sudden, right, they kept it because it was such an iconic landmark. All right. Well, it's interesting because the Eiffel Tower has a lot in common with a conductor, okay? And this is a common theme that you're going to see in quite a few buildings. And I have a theory on that, but we're going to touch on that in a little bit. All right, the Eiffel Tower is a work of architectural masterpiece. There's no doubt about it. And what's interesting is people believe that it doesn't serve a purpose other than being something to look at, maybe an observation point, a landmark of historic significance, etc., etc. That building has a meaning, all right? But what I'm trying to drive at here is that it was an architectural feat at the time, okay? There's no way, in my mind, that people from that era would have been able to construct that masterpiece in that amount of time with the intention of taking it down afterwards, all right? That is the key, is they want you to believe that these World's Fairs were built and then designed to be taken down afterwards, when that was not the case, okay? I believe that all of these World's Fairs, right, were an accumulation of technology and of architecture from a different civilization. Now, the reason that they had World's Fairs at these locations, in my mind, right, is because they wanted to allow the engineers of the time access to that technology in order to reverse engineer it and bring it into this new capitalist system. Now, you're going to ask me, where's the evidence for this? Why would you even have such a theory? Well, if you think about Edison and Tesla and the war that was waged between those two for the technology of electricity and which technology the public was going to adapt, it makes perfect sense. If you invite Edison as well as a figure like Tesla to a World's Fair, and both of them have access to that technology and get to see it, Tesla decided, I'm not going to reverse engineer it. I'm going to take that technology as it is and build upon it. And in the mind of Tesla, that's a very smart idea, because he doesn't have to waste his time reverse engineering it to get to the foundation, right? He can take the foundation and start building on it right away, which ultimately terrified the power structure that set this whole thing up to begin with. But that's my evidence, is you can directly see after the World's Fairs a bunch of scientists from all different industries compete in markets that are brand new, okay? And that is not a coincidence at all, all right? Not a coincidence at all. Now, there's a lot of other structures that were left around from these World's Fairs, right? One of the biggest structures ever built was an entire building, right? An entire convention hall that could fit thousands and thousands of people in it, made out of glass, okay? And it was ultimately taken down, but not till years and years and years after the World's Fair. You expect me to believe that they went through all the effort of building this monolithic structure out of glass just to be taken down afterwards? No, not at all. It was there for another reason, okay? A lot of these buildings serve the purpose of driving power. World's Fairs, one of the buildings had some of the biggest turbines known to man in them at the time. It doesn't make any sense at all, okay? Now, a lot of these structures have fireplaces in them with absolutely no chimney. But if you look at a lot of these pictures from back in that time period, right? And it's interesting that there's photography of all of this stuff that survived, but it's some of our biggest clues. There's two metal posts on the side of a lot of these fireplaces, and that would lead me to believe that these buildings were using some sort of wireless energy. Now, a lot of people have postulated, right, that this energy was being derived from Tesla towers all over the place, etc., etc., etc. And it would make sense, yes. But why would you not build these buildings to be electrically conductive themselves as well? Because you could definitely do it. What I'm trying to get at is, if you look at the architecture from a lot of these buildings, right, they have fireplaces with no chimneys. Well, they actually have chimneys nowadays, but you can clearly see that it wasn't part of the original architecture. In fact, a lot of these buildings were hacked to pieces in order to install chimneys in them to make those fireplaces serviceable and actually work. Because you had to find a way to heat these buildings after the reset, because that wireless energy was no longer being generated from the building itself. And you're going to ask me, where is the evidence that these buildings were harnessing and generating their own energy? Well, I want you to go into some of the districts in Boston or New York City and start looking at some of these older buildings. And some of them are very easy to find because they're actually the old substations. So in a lot of these neighborhoods in New York City, you're going to see windows that are just blocked out, that are all black right in the middle of a housing block, right? And it's going to look like another house, but you're going to wonder why the windows are blacked out and nobody ever goes in or out of that door. It's because it's an old substation, right? What's interesting about a lot of these buildings is they were constructed uniquely with alternated colored bricks, one being white and one being red. If you do a little bit of more research into this, you'll soon see that they are alternating between a quartz brick and a non-quartz brick. The white bricks have quartz in them, the red ones don't. Now, what does this mean? This means that they designed those buildings in order to retain a certain frequency and generate their own electricity. And this brings me back to the Eiffel Tower. How are you going to power the World's Fair in France? You are going to build a giant Tesla tower, i.e. the Eiffel Tower, and you are going to use that in order to wirelessly power the entire World's Fair in Paris. Now, why would you keep that structure around afterwards? Right? Why? Well, that structure was already there beforehand because they were using it to power all of those buildings before the reset. And the reason that they kept it afterwards is because they kept using that wireless technology to power Paris afterwards. Why the hell would a new governance, right, that came in and inherited all of this technology not continue to use it? They might not understand how to build it, right? But they would know how to use it if they're using it for these World's Fairs and powering them with this stuff, right? They're going to continue to use it. And it makes perfect sense that these old substations in New York City are still using that wireless technology. They're just not going to build more of it, right? Because that means you have to train electricians how to do that. You have to bring that technology back into the public eye, right? But if you can use the old systems and keep using them and just start charging people for it, you're going to. Now, few people know this about not the Eiffel Tower, the Empire State Building. It had a plaque all the way up until the 1970s in the main lobby that said, "This building powers 5 states with electricity." That building was designed to do the same exact thing that the Eiffel Tower does. Harness wireless technology, wireless energy. That building is a conductive unit in and of itself to harness the electricity. And if you look at the way that the Empire State Building was constructed, the first 3/4 of that building has asbestos insulation in it, right? And the top 1/3 of it doesn't. Well, if you were building a conductive tower in order to harness energy, that's exactly how you would do it on paper, okay? It's nothing more than a conductive rod, all right? Now, the more and more you open your eyes to the fact that this technology predates us and that we inherited it, the more and more things start to make sense when you start looking at the robber barons of the Industrial Revolution and how all of the sudden, in less than 100 years, right, we managed from having almost no technology at all to supposedly putting a man on the moon. We like to say that a lot of this technology was given to us by extraterrestrials or a different influence or aliens or psychically. No, we inherited all of this technology from a previous civilization, and we just reverse engineered it into something that could be used in a capitalist system. I hope that this helped you guys come to grips with a little bit more of what I was talking about in my previous video. As I've said, please go over to BitChute and follow me there. I appreciate all of you being with me. Let's make this channel grow. God bless. Have a nice day, and I'll talk to you guys soon.